The Moon in the Millpond, a Brer Rabbit story from the United States of America. Brer is another word for brother used in those days. So the title of the story is The Moon in the Millpond, a pond near a mill. Many years ago, a little boy rushed to visit an old man named Uncle Remus to listen to the tales he told about that scamp. A scamp is a wicked, worthless person. Brer Rabbit and all other folks and animals who lived in the olden days. One day, the little boy found Uncle Remus sitting in his usual chair and talking about a time when all the animals had been at peace with each other. "Tell me all about that," said the little boy. So Uncle Remus settled himself back into his chair and began. There was a time when there had been no trouble for weeks and weeks. All the creatures were chatting and talking together as if there had never been any falling out. Now that Brer Rabbit, he began to feel bored. He lay in the sun and kicked at the gnats. Gnats are winged fly resembling a mosquito. Then he nibbled at the grass, bit the grass in small bites, and finally he wallowed in the sand. Wallowed means he rolled about in a very lazy and a very relaxed manner. Then he fell in with Brer Terrapin, and after they had shaken hands, they sat down by the side of the road and chatted about old times. By and by, Brer Rabbit ventured to say that he thought it was time to stop being peaceful and have some fun. "Brer Rabbit," said Brer Terrapin, "you are just the fellow I have been looking for." "Well then," said Brer Rabbit, "we'll tell Brer Fox, Brer Wolf, and Brer Bear that tomorrow night we will meet them down by the mill pond to do a little fishing." Brer Rabbit paused for just a moment. "I'll do all the talking. All you have to do is to sit back and say, 'Yes, that's right, Brer Rabbit.'" With that, Brer Rabbit ran off home and went to bed. Now, Brer Terrapin, he was rather slow at getting about, so he set off for the mill pond to make sure that he would be there on time. Next day, Brer Rabbit sent word to all the other creatures about going fishing in the mill pond that night. "How wonderful!" they all said. "Why didn't we think of that?" Brer Fox invited Miss Meadows and Miss Moths to come and watch how clever he was at fishing. In those days, animals dressed in clothes and talked to human beings. Sure enough, when the time came, everyone was at the mill pond. Brer Bear brought a hook and line. Brer Wolf brought a hook and line. Brer Fox brought a dip net, and not to be outdone, Brer Terrapin brought the bait. A bait is a food used to trap fish. Miss Meadows and Miss Mott's didn't bring anything. They stood well back from the edge of the pond and squealed every time. Squeal means screeched. Brer Terrapin shook the bait box at them. Brer Bear said he was going to fish for mudcats. Brer Wolf said he was going to fish for horny heads. Brer Fox said he was going to fish for perch for the ladies. Brer Terrapin said he was going to fish for minnows. Minnows are small freshwater fish. Brer Rabbit winked at Brer Terrapin and said he was going to fish for suckers. They all got ready and Brer Rabbit marched up to the pond and made to throw his line into the water. Suddenly, it seemed as if he saw something. The other creatures, they stopped and watched. Brer Rabbit dropped his fishing rod. He stood there, scratching his head and looking down into the water. The girls began to feel uneasy, and Miss Meadows, she shouted out, "Land shakes! Brother Rabbit, what in the name of goodness is the matter in there?" But Brother Rabbit, he scratched his head and looked into the water. Miss Mott's, she hitched up her skirts and said she was monstrous feared of snakes and she surely hoped there were no snakes about. Brer Rabbit, he kept on scratching his head and looking into that millpond. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we might as well make tracks for home. There's going to be no fishing in this pond." With that, Brother Terrapin, he scrambled up to the edge of the pond and looked over. He shook his head and said, "Yes, that's right, Brother Rabbit." Then Brer Rabbit called out to the girls, "Don't worry, ladies. We will take care of you. There is nothing much the matter except that the moon has dropped into the water." With that, they all went to the bank and looked in. Sure enough, there lay the moon, swinging and swaying at the bottom of the pond. Brer Fox, he looked in and said, Well. Brother Wolf, he looked in and said, mighty bad. Brother Bear, he looked in and said, Tum. The ladies looked in and Miss Meadows, she squealed out, "Well, I never did." Brer Rabbit spoke up, "Ladies and gentlemen, whatever you say, unless we get that moon out of the pond, there will be no fish caught this night. If you ask Brer Terrapin, he will tell you the same." But Brer Terrapin, he said, "Yes, that's right, Brer Rabbit." Then the other animals asked how they could get the moon out of the mill pond. Now Brer Rabbit, he looked at the Brer Terrapin and said, "I reckon that best way out of this little difficulty is to send round to your old uncle, Mr. Mud Turtle. We will borrow his big net with the handles and drag that old moon out of the mill pond." And Brer Terrapin, he said, "Yes, that's right, Brer Rabbit. All the animals agreed that Brer Rabbit should go and borrow the net from Uncle Mud Turtle. While he was gone, Brer Terrapin said that he had heard tell time and again that anyone who pulled the moon from the water pulled a pot of money out with it. This made Brer Fox and Brer Wolf and Brer Bear feel mighty good. They said that as Brer Rabbit had been so kind as to fetch the net, they would do the fishing for the moon. When Brer Rabbit got back with the net, he made as if he wanted to go into the water. He pulled off his coat and was just unbuttoning his waistcoat when the other animals said they wouldn't dream of letting Brer Rabbit go into the water. So Brer Fox, he took hold of one handle of the net, and Brer Wolf, he took hold of the other handle, and Brer Bear, he waded along behind them. Waded means walked in the water behind them to lift the big net clear of logs and snags. They made one haul, and they didn't get the moon. They made another haul, still no moon. By and by, they got further out from the bank. Water ran into Brer Fox's ear. He shook his head. Water ran into Brer Wolf's ear. He shook his head. Water ran into Brer Bear's ear. He shook his head. And while they were shaking off their heads, and before they knew what was happening, they came to where the bottom of the pond shelved down fast. Brer Fox, he stepped out into the deep water. Brer Wolf, he stepped into the deep water. Brer Bear, he stepped into the deep water. And goodness gracious, they kicked and splattered and splashed the water. So much it seemed as if they were going to splash all the water out of the pond. When they finally scrambled out, the girls were sniggering. Sniggering means laughing in a half suppressed way, and giggling, and no wonder, for look where you might, you would never see three sillier looking creatures than Brer Wolf, Brer Fox, and Brer Bear. Brer Rabbit, he shouted out, "I expect you gentlemen will want to go home and put on dry clothes." He grinned. "Better luck next time. I do hear that the moon will bite at a hook if you have fools for bait." So Brer Fox and Brer Wolf and Brer Bear went dripping away. Brer Rabbit and Brer Terrapin went off for a party with the girls. Uncle Remus looked at the boy. "Time for you to go home too," he said. End of the story.